Hi there, everyone. Thanks for joining us on our second webinar in the MotioCI 3.0 series. This is Holly Rice, the Marketing Coordinator for Motio, and I'm with Adam Bunno, Senior Software Engineer for the MotioCI team. Today, Adam is going to talk about self-service deployment for Cognos. Before Adam gets started, though, I just want to mention a few items. Today's session will be recorded. And following the presentation, there will be a brief Q&A session, so please submit your questions at any time during the presentation in your Q&A panel. Adam, are you ready to get started?
I am.
Okay.
All right. So you've got a little outline here of what we're going to be talking about. First off, I'm going to give you a little introduction to the concept of self-service promotion. I'll actually show you a quick and easy self-service promotion very quickly and then run through just an overview of what the benefits are. After that, we'll talk about a case study in which IBM's Office of the CIO, the single largest Cognos installation in the world, is using MotioCI to help automate their deployment process. We've got some great numbers there to reflect the real ROI that you can get from our tool. And then also we'll go through step by step how to use self-service promotion in the MotioCI tool so you can see just how quick and easy, powerful, and flexible it all is going to be. And after that, of course, we'll try to leave about 5 minutes for Q&A at the end, so any questions you have, I'll be happy to answer. All right, so I'm going to show my screen here, and you'll see the main page for the MotioCI application, what you see when you first log in. Lots of testing-related information here, but we're going to focus on promotion today. And so our first point here we want to cover is what is self-service promotion. And I just kind of came up with my own little definition here. It's the idea basically that you want to allow your content authors and other people who are making changes in your source Cognos environments, like your dev environment, you want to allow them to contribute to the deployment process. So you don't want to have a single deployment administrator who's responsible for handling all of the movement of content from one Cognos environment into another. And there's a couple of ways you can do that. One, the simplest conceptually is just ad hoc promotion is what we call it. You let your report authors and, again, other content generators, you let them do the actual promotion of content from one environment, from dev to testing, or potentially from testing to production. And that works great for some people, especially if they have detailed enough security set up in their environment. But the downside is that it's not as organized as you might like, and also that it gives a little less control to the administrators than most places would prefer. And in order to accommodate places that want a more formal release process, we've created what we call label promotion. And the idea there is that an administrator creates a label, which is really a definition for a release of content that you're going to do at some point in the future. And as your report authors and content generators, as they work doing their jobs throughout the day or the week or the month, however long your release period is going to be, they simply, when they're done working, they mark the changes they've made as something that should be included in the release. And that's all done straight from our application and even integrated right into the Cognos Connection and Report Studio experiences. Then at the end of the release period, when you're ready to move the content on into your target environment, again, testing or production, an administrator can review the label, see what's in it, what's been marked for release, decide whether or not to go forward with that release. They can even test it, as we'll see. And if they approve, then they can simply, in just a couple of clicks, tell MotioCI to go ahead and send that content on to the next environment. And it's very quick, very easy, very streamlined, and much easier for the deployment administrator in terms of the burden of time that they have to spend handling deployment requests. So as I said, before we actually look at or talk about the benefits of self-service promotion, I just want to show you how really super easy this is to do. So let's say, for example, starting from the MotioCI interface here, that I decide I've got a couple of reports where I want to send them along to the next Cognos environment. I can just choose a report, say I want to send it along. You can see it's selected over here. I can choose another report from the same folder if I want, and I don't have to choose everything in the folder. Click Continue. All I have to do is say where I want to send it. You see I have to enter credentials for the target environment to show that I'm authorized in that environment, and then I click Run Promotion. And so you can see in just a few seconds here, I've managed to deploy 2 reports from one environment to another. And because that's so quick and easy, sometimes I feel I should stop and point out this was the equivalent of doing a Cognos export and then a file transfer to the other environment and then an import. But it took me only a couple seconds. and I had some advantages even beyond that in terms of flexibility and traceability. So let's talk about those advantages. The first one I've got on my list here, and it's one that I think hopefully has already made an impression on you, is that this is a lot faster and a lot easier than the regular Cognos deployment process. So everything is done by a web portal. In this case, I went through MotioCI. I'll show you examples later on where we go through Cognos Connection or from Report Studio. And also, you're going to find that because you don't have to do file transfers and imports into another environment, for many companies that actually reduces the number of people who have to be involved in the process. We have had clients who have adopted our process where previously they had to have 3 different people on board for each promotion, one to do the export, another to do the transfer, another to do the import. It's also much more flexible than the regular Cognos deployment process. As you saw, I was able to choose just 2 reports out of this whole folder full of reports. With the Cognos default process, you're actually forced to choose an entire folder full of content. In addition, if you want to promote things from outside the public folders area, for example, in the directory area where you'll find users' my folders and data sources and so on, then you actually have to do, I believe, the entire directory area rather than being able to choose bits and pieces that you want to send along. There's better record keeping. You can see that over here on the right-hand side. I am looking at what is actually a permanent record of the deployment that I did. I can see what environment was the source and which was the target. We'll talk about property sets later on. You can see which user is responsible for the deployment, when it occurred. You can see that it executed successfully. And of course, you can also see every single different object that was deployed. We have a revision history, a version control component to our product. And so these version numbers here actually tell you, if you were to look at the history of changes to an object, you know exactly which changes were sent from the source and what change was created in the target. But even better than that, you can skip right along to doing a side-by-side comparison of what exact changes you made to the report in this diff with the properties. So you can just scroll through here and see highlighted for us any changes that we actually made to the report. In this case, the spec didn't change, but we see a couple of the properties, the screen tip and the maximum number of retentions on it are kept right here. You also have a permanent history not only of each individual promotion, but for any object, you can look at its deployment history and see every time it's been moved from one environment to another. So for example, you can see every time that this was moved from development to the testing environment. You can even see here once that someone did a promotion from development into development, which is an interesting thing to have done. They're taking advantage there of a feature we have where you can promote to a different location. You can use our tool to move things and to fix up references to other objects as we do. And then finally, even beyond seeing for an individual promotion all the details of that promotion, and seeing for an object, and also you'll see later on for a label, being able to see the entire history of that object or that label, you have the ability, because this information is all stored in our database, to use a Cognos reporting package that we provide you that consumes our database as its data source, and which allows you to write reports consuming all this different information any way you want. So you can mix and match it and slice and dice it, put it together however you want, so that, for example, you could see every promotion that a given user has ever done. So it's very, very good for figuring out how content is moving from one environment to another. One thing we didn't see yet, but we will see, that is a great benefit, is our impact analysis feature, which combines our promotion and our testing features, so that you can actually say, before you send something into your production environment, I want to take the content that will be affected, I want to copy it into production, but I want to copy it into a safe area, a staged area. I want to run any tests that I've got set up against both my live content and my staged content, compare the results side by side. So in effect, what you can do is you can take your content, really run it in production, predict what it will look like after deployment, but you do all that without any risk to your end users, any chance that you're going to break a report or break a package in such a way that they get bad data or no data at all. And then finally, you can see right here, we've got a link that shows you can undo a deployment here, literally 1 and 2 clicks, and I can roll back the change that I just made. So if I do find that despite having my impact analysis feature available to predictively test, maybe there's something I never thought to test for, or maybe I haven't set up any tests yet. If you do find that you have a problem in your target environment as a result of a deployment, with just 2 clicks, you can roll back the entire thing, put yourself back into the good state that you were in before. And the way I like to pair up those 2 features, impact analysis and the undo of promotion, is that impact analysis gives you the possibility of disaster prevention with respect to Cognos deployment. And undo promotion, of course, gives you the option of disaster recovery if something does go wrong. So that brings us next to the case study for the IBM Office of the CIO. I'm going to throw some numbers at you here. First of all, this is a huge environment. Like I said, it's the biggest environment in the world. It's continuing to grow fast as they merge more and more of their separate environments into this main environment. They have 4,000 developers, not 4,000 reports, 4,000 report developers, 400,000 consumers of their reports, and over 30,000 reports. They do 300 deployments per week. And what they found is that because they're doing so many deployments, that the deployments alone were taking up 60% of their operation team's time. So this is a major expense for them. They have found with MotioCI that their process is now 3 times faster than it was before. They can handle 3 times as many deployment requests with the same number of people on their team. They found that their turnaround time on a deployment request from when it was made to when they were able to respond to it and actually perform it went down from 20 minutes all the way down to 20 plus minutes, I should say, all the way down to about 5 minutes. And they've already run the numbers, and just based on their initial adaptation, which they're still expanding the footprint of this, so it's going to grow, already they're estimating an annual savings of $155,000. And we're still just now in the early stages of setting up here. So there's great ROI on this product right from day one as soon as you start adopting the deployment process. And if you're a big environment in the long term, you'll put that $155,000 savings mark probably very much to shame. So I just zoomed through this very quickly before, but now let's talk about how you actually perform these self-service deployments in MotioCI. And since they're simpler, they're easier to understand, I'm going to start off with what we call an ad hoc deployment, and I'm going to do it right from this MotioCI application. So instead of doing a report again, since we already did see that, although it was very fast, what I want to show you here is that it's not just reports and packages and all the things in public folders that we can deploy. We actually can use promotion to shuttle content from one environment to another for just about anything in Cognos. So for example, if you're making a change to a data source connection and you're testing that out in dev and you're saying, okay, that looks good, let's send that to production, then you can use our tool to do that. Not just your report authors, but also your administrators can use our tool for deployments. So I'm going to actually send my new data source connection with maybe the different data source connection string on from dev to testing. And I also am going to point out again that you can choose any different group of objects you want, meaning that I can choose, let's say, this express author's role, so you can also do security with promotion, and send that along as well. And so once I've selected the objects that I want, I just need to choose an environment to send it on to. My credentials are already cached since I've already done promotions during this login session, so that actually saves me some time. And all I need to do now is just press run to kick things off. We will go through the impact analysis settings there in just a moment. And just like we saw before, my changes are made very, very quickly, sent on to the target environment. And with that, I'm actually all set. That's all there is to doing an ad hoc promotion from the MotioCI application. Now let's look at a different type of, or at least a different way of doing an ad hoc promotion. So let's imagine maybe you're an administrator, and let's say, for example, that you are customizing a setting on the sales folder. Maybe you're adding even just a new screen tip, which isn't necessarily something that a report administrator would do. You've made your change right here in Cognos Connection. You probably don't feel like going into a separate application. So what we're going to do instead is we're going to pop open the revision history right from here in Cognos Connection. You see my changes already picked up in the revision history. So if I want to send my new screen tip on over to my test environment, I can do that very easily. Just like we've seen, in only a few seconds, moving content from one place to another. There we go, all done, and I can actually check the impact of what I did, make sure I didn't change any properties I didn't mean to change. There we go, is the screen tip that I added, that's what I wanted to see. And everything else looks good too. I see I didn't accidentally change security or anything like that. So that's how easy it is to do a promotion right from Cognos Connection. And now let's take a look in Report Studio. And in Report Studio, I'm going to talk a little bit more about sort of a real-life scenario you might have for a report author. Our testing here, you can see up in the top of the screen, there's this little red dot. At a glance, we know there's something wrong with this report. The report author could pop open this integration window to look at the test cases for the report, figure out what's wrong with it. I'm not going to waste time on that since we're here to talk about promotion. But let's say what they found is that there's an absolute image path on this image, and that's a bad thing. Oops, that's also a bad thing. And they also found that there's a problem with their revenue calculation, and they want to fix that too. So now they could just save their work the way they normally would. I'm going to suggest that it's better to use our check-in feature because you can put in a comment to be communicated through a ticketing system like Jira, Track, or Quality Center and explaining what you did. And you can also automatically run your test cases to double check that everything is going to work right after you do this fix. So you make sure you don't introduce any new problems. So again, that's testing. I'm not going to dwell on it, except to note that those test cases are about to succeed, and they'll let the report author know that this report is good and it can be safely deployed to the next environment. So you see my change here is already picked up right from Report Studio. If I'm doing a pure ad hoc deployment model, then I can just send this as a report author. I'm just empowered to say, all right, I'm going to send this to the test environment so the testers can look at that. And as it happens, because of our promotion history, your testers can look at the history and actually know which things have been promoted that they will want to take a look at and test. All right, so you see I've gone and deployed my fix all the way over to testing, and once again I can confirm for myself which changes did I make to this object. And I can see, for example, here that the change to the revenue expression was communicated from the dev environment to the test environment. So that's all good. So now let's say instead of doing a labeling approach to deploy, or instead of doing an ad hoc approach to deployment, what we have instead is a labeling approach. And so what happens at the beginning of a release cycle is the administrator is going to come in to MotioCI, and they're going to create a label to house the next release. And let's call this, let's say, release 6.0. And let's say they have a list of things that they know need to go into release 6.0. They can very easily edit that label right from here. Let's say we want to include just that handful of 3 reports. And there you go. They've got the beginning of a release definition for version 6.0. They can come back in and edit it anytime they want. That's very easy to do. You can see everything comes in pre-selected. You can also explore every time you change a label. There's a permanent history of that change. You can explore what's in the label. And right from the history here, we can see which labels that change is a part of. There it is, release 6.0. And so if you wanted to just make it easier for your administrators to select content with more flexibility based on maybe change lists that are sent to them by developers, so maybe that's your existing process, you could do that. But what I want to show you is that with self-service approach to promotion, you can actually save your administrator a lot of time and a lot of complexity in your process. So once again, I'm going to point out that we can do these things from both Cognos Connection and Report Studio. This time, let's say I want to include the sales folder object in this release. I can pop open the revision history, and using this labels column, I can just double-click to mark that this change to the folder that I just made earlier should be included as part of the label. So with that, as a content generator, I've done everything I need to do to make sure that my change to this label is included in the release. Let's go back over to Report Studio. And let's say now, we did our deployment previously, right, where we already sent our change into the testing environment. I'm going to go ahead and undo that just because I want to redo it using a label. There we go. So now I've rolled back in test environment. I've undone the change I did earlier. And now what I want to do instead is, again, imagining I'm a report author who just made my fix to the report. I saw from testing that I fixed the problems with the report. Again, all I have to do is double-click on the labels column and mark this change as something that should be in release 6.0 whenever release 6.0 happens. And again, as a report author, that means I'm done. I don't have to go to some external release document. I don't have to send an email to the administrator. I've already marked this as ready to go. And so now let's imagine, as the administrator, that it's time to perform our release, to send our content from dev into testing or testing into production. And what I want to do is I want to go to Release 6.0. Again, we saw I can open this up, I can explore what's in it anytime that I want. You see there's new versions corresponding with the changes I made and showing the content that I've added. But when I'm ready to do the deployment, all I have to do is right-click, say I want to deploy it. This is the same screen as before, all the same kind of options, and click Run. So now as an administrator, you don't have to take a release document or go through a bunch of emails and put together an export archive. You don't have to worry about the fact that when you do an export of the folder, you have to take everything in the folder. You don't have to, some people, in order to avoid that whole folder problem, they actually copy the reports into a different folder, promote those. You end up with all kinds of headaches around dependencies. All those things go away. And as a deployment administrator, the process of doing the deployment is just as quick as all that. And so you see I just successfully deployed 5 items from a folder full of a bunch of items, including the folder itself, very, very easily from one place to another. So it's incredibly quick, incredibly painless, especially for the administrator relative to what it otherwise would be. So now that we've promoted a label, we've covered actually all the mechanics of doing promotions, and you've also even seen the undo. What I want to show you next is what impact analysis can do for you in terms of making the decision as an administrator whether you want to deploy the label or not. So one more time here, I'm going to use my deployment history for the label here. I'm going to undo the change I just made, roll it all back so we can do it again. And again, you see how easy it is if you decide you don't like a change that was made with promotion. There you go, it's undone. And so what I'm going to say now is, as an administrator, before I sign off on this, I want to do some testing of it to make sure everything will the target environment. So in this case, I'm going to set it up just the same as before. But I'm going to say I want to perform an impact analysis, and I want to do it using test cases pulled from, I can say either from the source or the target or both. And I am going to say in this case, let's do it from the source because I have some better test cases set up there in this particular environment. And I can also say, if the impact analysis succeeds, go ahead and just promote everything. If it fails, don't promote it, leave the promotion in a save state so I can review it and decide what to do. And so what's happening right now is we're looking at everything that's included in this release. So in this case, it's these 5 objects, 4 reports in a folder. We're figuring out all of your executable content, so that's reports, queries, analyses, interactive reports. We're figuring out which ones might be affected by the deployment. And in this case, it happens that all of these reports themselves are changing. That's why they're affected. But let's say a report wasn't going to change, but its package was. That's something that we would also identify, and we would also make sure to account for that package change in our predictive testing. So what's happening right now is we've copied all of the changes we're going to make over into my testing environment, my target environment. I put them in a separate folder. It's a folder that belongs to MotioCI that can perfectly well be hidden from your users. Copied them in there, fixed up all the references, made them work just like they're going to work after promotion. And I've run my tests against both the live content that my end users would see right now and against the staged content that represents what they will see after the deployment. And I get a side-by-side comparison of those results. So for example, if I'm going to be making any changes to the SQL that will run as part of this test, then I'll see that. In this case, it looks like I'm not going to be changing the SQL. And once these all finish running, we'll be able to see which things succeed, which things fail, and so on. That seems to be taking a moment to run. I will give you a heads up that we're just about to the point where we're going to go through Q&A, so it's a good time to enter your questions. And so as this continues to run, what I'll do is I'll move on to the last section that I've got marked off in my outline here, which is to talk about some of the odds and ends that we've got as far as other features that make our promotion feature more robust. And the first one, and this is one that's been very important to some of our clients, is promotion groups. So some of our clients have multiple production environments. In one case, with a large bank, large European bank, they had 20 target environments throughout the world, so spread out all over the world as well. And they were finding that they actually had to employ 2 full-time deployment administrators just to handle moving content from their testing environment into their 20 different production environments. using something that we call promotion groups, you can make that one environment into a single promotion target. And I'll show you what selecting that looks like, where we actually, I guess you don't have any promotion groups set up here. Oh, that's surprising. Well, it would look just like choosing one of those environments from the list. We also have the ability to save promotions, which means you set them all up, but you save them so that somebody else can maybe review them and sign off and kick them off. And you can schedule them too, so if you want your promotion to run overnight, you can do that. And if you want more, even more robust scheduling of the promotion of your content, you can promote that. You can actually schedule, you can trigger a promotion externally using an API that we've got. Very easy to do. It's just a simple URL invocation. And so that means if you have a system that handles scheduling outside of Cognos, something like Control-M, then it's very easy to have that manage your deployment processes if you want to automate them. And so finally, I got a little bit out of order here. You do see that our impact analysis is finished running. We've got some failures, which is not a good thing. We're not seeing execution times, and we're not seeing outputs that we can get, so it looks like we've got some problem with running our reports in the target environment. I think our report server must have gone down. But we can at least look, we can see which assertions succeed and fail, which testing results we've got basically telling us what's right or what's wrong with this test case. We can figure out why it failed. We can adjust our deployment accordingly, rerun the impact analysis, keep iterating until we feel safe to send our content on to the next environment. And so with that, I'm going to wrap up and say let's start our Q&A.
All right. Thanks, Adam. We have a few questions here. The first one is, does a Cognos user need a special role assignment to execute a deployment in MotioCI?
Sure, and that's actually a really good question. One of our features here didn't really make the cut as far as bringing it into the actual outline here, but one of the really good things that we do is we give you very good control over who can do what in terms of promotion. So in order to do a promotion from one environment to another, there's a role in the development environment that says if you're allowed to promote from development. There's a role in the testing environment or the production environment, whatever target, that says whether you're allowed to send content into that target. There's also those roles, there's separate roles for ad hoc versus label-based promotion, so you can restrict things that way. And our roles also allow you to make it so that someone can have the right to update a label, the way that we saw our report authors doing, but not promote it, so that you can make sure you have separation of duties between the report authors who are putting content into the label saying this is ready to be deployed, and the administrators who get to make the final decision on doing the deployment. And one more note as well, you saw several times where we have to put in the credentials to use for our deployment. Those credentials are going to be used in the target environment to check that you're authorized to make each and every one of the changes you're going to make. So even if you got carried away and gave too many people permission to do promotions from development into testing or into production, even if you gave them all the rights in MotioCI, if they try to use credentials in target environment that are not authorized to update a certain object, so maybe a package or maybe a security-related object, something like that, they just aren't allowed to touch, Cognos will reject their attempt to update the object even then. So no matter how you set up your security for MotioCI, people will not be able to do anything with our tool that they could not have done directly through Cognos.
Okay. Thank you. Okay, here's another one. If my company only bought versioning, can we do impact analysis?
All right, so impact analysis is considered a testing feature. I should note, to clarify this, some of you probably already talked to us on this, that there are different levels of licensing in terms of the feature set. You can get versioning and promotion separate from testing is the basic idea here. You would need to have the promotion and the testing options in order to do impact analysis. But one thing you may like to know is that we also can potentially offer you versioning and promotion and testing on one environment and just versioning on another environment. And if you do that, then you can use the impact analysis on promotions either from or to the environment that has testing. So you don't necessarily have to license all your environments with testing in order to be able to benefit from impact analysis.
Okay. Can Motio deployment help moving ETL work done in Cognos Data Manager from one environment to another?
So the ETL work, if you're referring to the actual data in your database, that is not something that we do. We're not ourselves an ETL process that can mirror one process from a process from one database to another. But what we can do, especially with our testing and with impact analysis, is we can verify that before and after the ETL process and before and after the deployment process, that you get the outputs that you expect from your reports. And so we didn't go into testing today, but I will note that you can actually do data validation in our testing, including in impact analysis, so that you can actually compare the results you see in the report to what you're currently seeing in your database. So while we won't perform the actual copying over of the ETL results for you, we'll allow you to verify that either the ETL results or the promotion you're considering doing to respond to an ETL change will work out fine.
Okay. The next question is, Cognos shows me the modification date and time of modified objects. If I use Motio, is that the modification time of the source or the time of the deployment?
Okay. So that will be, the Cognos number will be the time of the deployment, because Cognos is just showing you when that object in, let's say, the testing environment, the target environment, when that object got updated. But since we've got our permanent histories here, you can actually see all of that information. You can bring it all together. You can say, all right, I see I sent version 3 from my source of the sales folder. You can look at the sales folder, and you know that version 3 was created at 1:44 p.m. on July 18th. So you can, first of all, you can manually tie those things together, but remember also that we've got our reporting feature where you could write a report to connect that information together for you. So to show you everything that was updated in either testing or promotion environment, you can actually show when the change that was promoted there was made in a single report alongside it.
And we're just about 2 minutes over. I don't think we're going to have time to get to all the questions, so if you did submit a question, we will answer it after the fact via email. So Adam, I guess let's just wrap this up.
All right. I just want to thank you for your time, and definitely, even if you haven't typed in the question yet, if you get a question to us, I'll be happy to respond to it.
You want to talk about the next session before we close out?
Sure, and actually this is going to fit pretty well with, I think, our last question that we had. The next session is going to cover data validation, which I mentioned is something that we can do in a whole lot of ways. So we're going to look at ways that you can set up testing to verify that what you see in your reports, the actual data, matches up with your expectations in a number of ways. You can compare against data from the same report, from other reports in your environment, other environments, and even from your underlying data warehouse. So we'll go over how you can do that and how you can benefit from it.
Okay, that wraps it up. Thank you everyone for joining us, and we look forward to seeing you at the next webinar, which will be next Thursday.